Okay, let's get the show on the road. Welcome everybody, good morning, and welcome to another SolarWinds briefing in 2020. Hope you're all keeping well and safe out there. And first of all, we're going to kick off with a quick poll. Of course, the topic today is going to be all around modernizing network operations and how to check all the boxes. And what we mean by that is how do we look at it from a whole holistic perspective, looking at all of the requirements across network management. First of all, we're going to kick off with a poll. We're going to run this poll in the background there. So the question is, are there problems your current network monitoring solution isn't solving for? So A, can't see the problems related to SaaS or distributed applications. B, unable to detect issues related to configuration changes. C, unable to determine when behavior is outside of a normal range. D, lack of visibility to devices required to serve remote workers. E, unable to manage and plan for network bandwidth. Or F, not enough time in the day to get the work done. Spend too much time troubleshooting. I suspect that will be quite a common answer. So we're going to let that run in the background, and we'll have a look at the results later on. First of all, may I introduce my colleague, my eminent colleague, Sir Tony Johnson, all the way from Cork, Ireland. How are you, Tony? Do you want to give yourself a quick 30-minute leg up there?
Sure, absolutely, yes. So thanks everyone for joining today. My name is Tony Johnson. I'm product manager for the Orion platform. With SolarWinds a good number of years now, working across the entire product portfolio. So very interested to get your thoughts and questions today.
And I said 30 minutes, I meant 30 seconds, Tony, sorry. We'll be here all day long. I'm John O'Callaghan. I look after product marketing in the international markets, based in Cork in Ireland here. But been with SolarWinds now for just over 2.5 years. Prior to that, spent some time in the channel and also spent quite a bit of my life in the Dell EMC group, EMC primarily, and back in Dell back in the early days when I had hair. But that was a long time ago. Okay, so let's get into the content. So the first thing is look at the agenda, and we will look at the technologies, obviously, but we certainly want to make sure that we kind of, as the title says, tick all the boxes here. So when we think around reliability or availability and so on, one of the things we want to look at is, can we troubleshoot network performance for SaaS applications? So, the majority of organizations we speak to today have deployed some sort of SaaS environment. Obviously, things like Office 365 is very popular. Salesforce is very popular. Marketo for marketing, and a whole bunch of other, there's thousands of them out there.
So and I suppose it's important, users don't really delineate between what's on-prem or in SaaS or in terms of what infrastructure is hosting them. So IT teams need to support both of these infrastructures.
Yeah, and it's absolutely end-to-end, right? So, network administrators, they're very well able to manage their internal networks. But of course, when that good old data heads out of the network into the service provider or down into the SaaS provider, then, it's out of their control in terms of the network. So we want to help them get end-to-end visibility there. Second one there is monitoring complex devices required for today's remote workforce. And of course, this year has been a very strange year. We've had a lot of work from home now. So it's 5 or 6 months that I've been working from home. Tony, you're in the same boat.
Yep.
And we're seeing a lot of stress on things like VPNs, and obviously people have to have their local Wi-Fi as well to connect in. So we'll have a look at that as well, Tony. Correct?
Absolutely. I mean, considering the increase we're seeing in exploits, bad actors, they really kind of see today's environment as an opportunity for income. Businesses are at risk really if we're not protecting against those network threats. And even before the pandemic, budgets were constrained, but now with even less resources, the challenges for network admins in understanding and effectively managing that bandwidth is all the more important.
Absolutely. And moving into the second topic there, security and compliance. Obviously, network configuration management is key. Not just from an operational perspective, operational risks, of course. I think the statistic is that 80% of network outages or typical outages are caused by some human being getting involved in some configuration file somewhere and changing something, and
Absolutely.
then not having the ability to roll back, as they say.
Yeah,
and across that, Tony, many times, I'm sure.
Yeah, and not like the old adage about 80% of statistics being made up on the spot, but we do back up all of these findings, from multiple sources. But certainly, having the tools to effectively back up and manage your device configurations in a secure manner is critical.
Yeah, I stick with Mr. Pareto all the time. 80-20, it's always correct.
Absolutely.
And of course, establishing baselines, detecting potential malicious behaviors, creating rules to shut down suspicious activities, and so on. And that goes across multiple areas of our product lines. We do cover it in Network Configuration Manager, but also outside of that in our security portfolio with Security Event Manager as well. Mm-hmm. And then finally, a big one, of course, cost efficiencies. One of the big challenges we see, Tony, we talk to a lot of customers and a lot of partners out there who kind of come across this, where organizations have lots and lots of different tool sets. They're licensed tools, or there's some freebies, or there's some open source type tools they're using. And if they're not connected or integrated or don't talk to each other, then they can actually cause more problems than they fix.
Absolutely. We refer to that as swivel chair integration. You're trying to correlate and collate information from multiple systems that provides, just a challenge in collecting it and understanding, which increases the kind of time to resolution, but also is a barrier when it comes to collaboration between your kind of administrative silos. So if the network admin, has been blamed for poor application performance, how do they, get together, look at the statistics, analyze the data, and understand really what the root cause is. So reducing that mean time to resolution is all the more challenging when using multiple systems.
Absolutely, and if we can get visual analysis of that as well to reduce that mean time to response or even mean time to resolutions, answering that age-old question, is it the network or the app? And of course, our good colleague Sasha Giza says it's neither, it's the database, right?
Absolutely, there's always somewhere else to look.
Yeah, he's got something in it for the database guys. But anyway, okay, so moving in, so kind of why would people want to do this? Well, there's some very good reasonings behind this. So going back to that reliability perspective, 22%, and this is based on customer surveys that we've put together over the last number of months. My good colleague Jennifer Kowleski was driving this project and got some very interesting feedback. So on the reliability side, 22% average reduction in incidents and a 22% decrease in mean time to response. So that's good in any results to the ability to combine and integrate network management solutions together. And also a very important one as well, because everything that we do, I suppose, at the end of the day, relates back to customer experience, right? So I call it the customer experience chain, and any weak link in that chain or any degradation of a service or a break in the chain can impact the customer experience. So what we're seeing is kind of an 18% average increase in improvements in customer experience, CSAT scores, etc., NPS scores. And of course, that's hugely important.
Yeah, and when we say customers, it doesn't necessarily mean external facing consumers of your applications or your services, but your internal customers. So the staff within your organization that are consuming applications and have no knowledge of the underlying network or systems that are hosting those.
Yeah, and of course we've also integrated our network monitoring alerting engine into the service desk solution as well. So it's kind of an end-to-end, monitor, alert, report, and respond, right? So we can cover all of that. Then moving into the second piece there, security and compliance. So protecting against regulatory penalties for non-compliance. So we often talk around kind of things like application outages as being bad, but security breaches being worse. Because any security breach, if it hits the Twitter feed or the news feeds, can have a devastating effect on organizations. And people do get fined through breaches, but even more important than that, I think, is the kind of loss of reputation or reputational impacts that these type of things can have, and the kind of cost that can relate to. And we can all relate to this. We've all done our online banking, and we can't transact something on our online banking system, and we get very, very annoyed very, very quickly. And therefore, we're kind of saying, I'm going to switch my bank next week because the reputation has dropped, right?
Absolutely. You can't underestimate the potential impact from reputation alone. So whether that's ransomware exploit on your network, or hijacking of a website in other means, that can be massively damaging to an organization.
Yeah, actually a good example. I was down in South Africa many years ago now, but we were having a briefing with the CIO of a large financial institution. Obviously, I won't name the name of the company, but in the first 30 minutes of the briefing, there was a phone call came in, basically saying that there was some problem with the network, and that people in Johannesburg couldn't transact kind of payments on Visa cards and so on for their groceries. So we continued with the briefing, but half an hour later, the press rang, and we were looking for some comment from the CIO in terms of what was going on. And when I got back to my hotel that night, the first item on the news was nobody could pay for their groceries in Johannesburg. So, that was a huge reputational impact. And it took them 24 hours to discover there was a kind of a faulty network card or a port on a network device, which actually caused all of those issues. So, it could have been business continuity challenge. Maybe they didn't have enough resilience in that. But if they had something that could spot that and identify the root cause very quickly, they could have avoided all that issue.
Well, there's certainly some features of the Orion platform and its modules that immediately come to mind there, John, and I'm happy to say we're probably going to discuss some of those in a demo.
Absolutely, yeah. And also the cost efficiency side of things. So, saving time is always a good thing. Spending more time on projects. So rather than having to do kind of day-to-day tasks, being able to spend a little bit more time on kind of innovative projects is cool. And then, of course, eliminating other tools. So eliminating 3 other monitoring tools on average came out of the survey as well. So very good results coming from that. So one of the things we're going to look at, Tony, in the demo is looking at end-to-end performance of networks for SaaS and distributed applications. Very, very important. And I know you can cover kind of both an external example and also maybe an internal example as well.
There's a lot of content there to digest through that slide, but if you were to condense that down into a kind of a single statement as to what NetPath offers, it's a visual representation of your critical service delivery path, whether that's completely on-prem or whether that's across multiple ISPs and peering partners along the way. So it's a TCP-based representation of that service delivery path that allows us to look at hop by hop the packet loss, the latency between each of those hops. Most importantly, I suppose not to spoil it, but you do lose a certain amount of responsibility and administrative capability when traffic leaves your network, but NetPath offers you a quick route to identify a point of contact for those nodes which are outside your organization.
Yeah, a couple of use cases. I was at Cisco Live in Barcelona, and a couple of customers came up. One was an organization who had global real estate rentals. So they wanted to put a probe in each of their sites and then have that going back to their global network. So if there's any issue with the offices in London or Paris or San Francisco or wherever they may be, they could identify that on the NetPaths that they'd set up. And another one was a large telco provider up in the Nordics wanted to ask customers could they put probes on the customer side so that they can kind of validate the service provider network into those environments as well.
Absolutely, that's a really great example there. So it's one of my favorites. Given the various paths and routes that traffic can take into your organization, particularly for an MSP, being able to get that insight from a remote customer's deployment is massively beneficial.
And especially in the days of SDN, software-defined networking. So Azure is completely SDN, so it can change every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes, and we have the ability to go back in time as well, of course, to see that.
Yeah, we'll probably look at an example in the Orion demo, but we're kind of simulating these network path operations every 10 minutes. So quite quickly, you can go back historically and define and look at what the traffic or the path the traffic was taken at that particular time.
Yeah, and of course the cool thing is NetPath is not a product, it's just a feature of a product, NPM, Network Performance Monitor. Moving on, other capabilities of the Network Performance Monitor solution in network management, in the pillar of ITOM, as we call it, IT Operations Management, is Network Insight. So Tony, this is kind of a richer experience for certain technologies, right?
Yeah, so I suppose most monitoring solutions will use common protocols, ICMP, SNMP, and WMI to retrieve metrics and health information from devices. But really going a little bit beyond that and looking at device-specific capabilities using additional polling methods like CLI or API when we consider the likes of F5s or maybe VPNs on a Cisco firewall, or perhaps the relationship between global traffic managers, local traffic managers, and other elements of your F5 load balancing environment, or even the last item to call out the status and health of the switches within your switch stacks. So looking at power ring redundancy and data ring redundancy, it's giving you the insight into the technologies that those specific devices are providing.
Yeah, and for anybody in the call who's not familiar with SolarWinds products, if you see the word insight in any of our product features, then that gives you that deeper, richer experience. We also have a thing called App Insight on our server and application monitor solution, where we can monitor applications and servers, as the name suggests as well. And then finally, on this current section on the webcast today, VPN, right? So obviously this has been a huge growth area in the last 5 or 6 months, given the pandemic and people having to log in from remote locations. So Tony, you've seen people putting these kind of crisis dashboards together, right, on the VPN?
Yeah, at the start of our kind of work from home shift, there's been a significant increase in the amount of users accessing remote VPN technologies, whether that's Palo Alto or Cisco, and the network insight functionality within Orion provides us with that level of insight into users who are connected and so forth. I'll just go ahead and share out my screen here. We can actually take a look at some examples.
Perfect.
I seem to be precluded from doing that. If somebody could pass me the ball.
Yeah, 1 second. Let me just scroll down my little screen here so I can send that to you. Good old pilot
control. Absolutely, just acknowledged. So for those who might not be familiar with SolarWinds, we do have a public-facing demo accessible at oriondemo.solarwinds.com. That will go ahead and log you in with the guest credentials. On the Orion platform, we have multiple modules, each of which can be accessed from their respective menus beneath my dashboards here. So most of the menu bar items here represent individual products with individual licensing tiers across the platform. Network obviously indicates our network performance monitor module. But across the Netman portfolio, we do have additional products. But we're going to focus on some of the features that we addressed in the slides up until now. The first of which is the network insight for our Cisco switch stacks. So drilling down typically to a node is going to expose critical health and performance information like CPU, memory, interface utilization, perhaps even volume information if being polled for that. But on the left-hand side of the page here, we have additional sub-navigation, and specific to this device, we are monitoring the status of the switch stacks. So on the right-hand side here are two resources showing me the status of redundancy for my data ring and also the stack power ring. Really at a glance, we can see the switch stack members. This is a fairly basic example here with only 2 switches. You might have a more complex environment, but I can immediately identify there which is the master switch participating in that stack. Similarly, for a ASA device, here we're looking at our East Firewall A node. So we do have in our demo environment 2 Cisco ASA devices in a HA pair. And immediately you'll notice the favorite site-to-site VPNs resource here. So you can see the status when that particular site-to-site VPN is failing. In this case, it's failing at phase 2. And again, on the left-hand side, we have specific features for site-to-site and remote access VPNs. So drilling down to site-to-site provides me with a filtered list where I can drill down on specific attributes of the VPN tunnels and identify at which phase and the status of those VPN tunnels. Clicking the star here is going to add those to the favorites so that they appear on the node details page. For remote access, we're going to have additional sets of data here in terms of the username, the volume of data they have both uploaded and downloaded, and the duration of their connection. With the ability here to search, this can often reduce the time it takes to troubleshoot remote connectivity issues for particular users, understand if there are perhaps sessions that aren't disconnecting correctly, or better understand your license utilization on specific devices. The next feature that we mentioned earlier was specific to F5. So for those who have largely distributed environments and are balancing services in front or behind of something like an F5, the load balancing view here gives me again this visual representation and the relationship between all of my services, GTMs, LTMs, virtual servers, pools, and right down to the pool members. Historically, I can see the number of concurrent connections connections by virtual server. What's really nice here is how we present the data in a drill down manner. Looking at the global traffic managers here, these are both in a pair indicated by the dotted rectangle around them. But if I see a particular service being in a warning or critical state and I want to understand the relationship it has with the underlying infrastructure, I can simply click it and show the relationships of that particular entity. So now it's filtered it down nicely for me, and I can see the status of the local traffic manager. From here I can display the details page. Okay. So we can see that there are 2 virtual servers, both of which are unreachable, and this is being polled via the F5 API. So this is not, ICMP status from the Orion server to these virtual servers, but it is the status as reported actually from the perspective of the F5's API. And finally, onto the initial feature that we discussed, which is NetPath. So NetPath is a feature of Network Performance Monitor. As I mentioned, it uses a custom TCP packet to simulate application traffic. Essentially, what that means is that, if within my organization I'm able to navigate to a particular host on a particular port, it means that all of the routing and firewall rules are in place for me to do so. And oftentimes there is absolutely no to minimal changes required to enable this functionality within your environment. NetPath is based on a Windows agent. So the first node in the sequence here is a Windows machine running the Orion agent software. From its perspective, we can see the internal hops. Hovering over a link will show me the latency, packet loss, and the transit likelihood. For any devices outside of my network, you might notice there that we are retrieving BGP information for those nodes, and clicking on the node calls up the details panel here on the right-hand side. So at a glance now, I can immediately see that the latency that we are experiencing getting to our AWS lab is not in fact due to latency or packet loss or misconfiguration internally on our network, and is only happening when our traffic is transiting this particular path. In fact, we're experiencing 21% packet loss with a 65% transit likelihood. Clicking on the node, I have the email and phone number for the owners of that node, so I can quickly go to my ISP and have them, open up the necessary tickets or make any routing changes to eliminate the problem. If we come back to network and NetPath services, we can have a further look at some examples internally. Let's use NetSuite as a nice example. And by the way, you can test these paths from multiple locations. For example, in our Office 365 test here, we are testing the path from multiple data centers and locations, all of which have the Orion agent software installed. So let's drill down into NetSuite from the Brno office. It's immediately apparent here we've got something of significance on the right-hand side, but just to cover off some of the integration and the data that's available from NetPath. When we click on a node for which we are monitoring via SNMP, we can see CPU and memory utilization as well as interfaces on that device. The smaller circle here indicates an interface, and in this particular instance, it's an interface which is sending us flow data, evident by the fact that we can see the top 3 conversations here on the navigation panel. So NPM provides the basic NetPath functionality, but integration is a key part to the Orion platform, and this is just one of the use cases for NetPath and its integration with NetFlow Traffic Analyzer. The other of which is, of course, configuration management. So as John mentioned earlier, having the ability to back up your configs, analyze them, provide real-time change detection is critical in understanding and reducing outages. If I click on config change, we can see a before and after comparison. No need to do any manual work here other than scroll to identify any adds, moves, or changes to the device config. In this case here, we can see a static route has been applied, which is preventing us from actually reaching the intended host. From the history of the chart beneath, we can see the 10-minute intervals So we can identify exactly when this particular problem was occurring. If I was to go back here to an earlier time frame, we can see exactly how that traffic was reaching its intended destination.
Time travel kicks in again.
Time travel, yes, that was the other feature. So for those who are Orion customers and are advocates for our Orion Maps functionality, if you have not updated to the latest 2020.2 release, there is one really amazing feature that I am going to show you in relation to Orion Maps, and that is a feature that we're referring to as time travel. Okay, so maps are invaluable really in understanding the relationship and performance between connected devices on your network and your applications. So any of the maps that have this little clock icon here are enabled for history tracking. I think we could have just went all out and called it time travel, but let's have a look at Active Directory servers. As well as providing custom icons and custom backgrounds and a host of other features in the latest release for Orion Maps, the time travel functionality is exposed here via the ability to view the history for this particular map. So very similar to NetPath. Okay, we can see back in time what changes and what performance impacts were happening as this map was captured. Okay, because it is a snapshot, we don't have the historical data to display in a hover, but drilling down into a particular node brings you to PerfStack. And John, this is the kind of visual analysis that we were talking about here, the ability to correlate, here in this case, it's an increase in CPU load, right? So if I'm interested in this particular point in time, I can drill right down and see how that correlates.
That's when somebody loaded up the new Microsoft Flight Simulator there.
It sounds like it, yeah, trying to get some real weather updates. Yeah. So tons of great features in there to help you reduce your time to resolution, identify root cause, collaborate with your colleagues, and correlate information from multiple systems, whether it's network status, interface utilization, VPNs, load balancing environments, something as simple in this case as CPU load. But if we were to add additional entities here to PerfStack, you could see that from the list of entity types that are available, we could easily look at the historical status of values for something like an application, concurrent connections to a web server. We could include NetFlow data, logs, be they syslog or Windows event logs. PerfStack really is a very powerful feature to allow you to create that visual chart and share and save that between your colleagues.
Very good. Just spotting a quick question there coming in around NetPath. Somebody on the call there has it on the RMM console. So RMM is actually part of our MSP applications, and NetPath is a feature on that. So you're quite correct. You will see NetPath as an option on the RMM console. It's also a feature of Network Performance Monitor for the licensed products that we sell as well. So hopefully that'll clear up that little bit of confusion.
Yeah, we definitely like to share technology amongst our product sets, and NetPath is equally as important to MSP as it is to consumers of traditional on-prem software. My understanding is that it functions in the same way. It is based on an agent on a Windows machine, and it's using a custom TCP packet. So, unlike Traceroute, it's not going to get blocked by a firewall along the way. It shouldn't experience the same timeouts. But that, both should fundamentally be the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's move into the next section. I'm just going to take back the. Okay, sorry, Tony, can you make me presenter again there, please?
Sure.
Thank you very much indeed. So moving into the next piece, so that kind of covers network monitoring, network device monitoring, end-to-end visibility, mapping, dashboards, etc. Another key component of the course is the configuration management. We've touched on this, but we're going to go through a little demo of NCM Network Configuration Manager in a second. And this is a good time to pause as well and talk around some of the product naming conventions that we have, because it's quite important. So, for example, if you see the term monitor within the product, so network performance monitor, that's exactly what it's going to do, right? It's going to monitor the performance of the network and the network devices. If you see analyzer, like a NetFlow traffic analyzer or database performance analyzer, again, that's what it's going to do. It's going to analyze the traffic, or it's going to analyze the database performance. And then we have manager as well. So manager is when we can actually take actions from our own console, and this is across a number of the products. So network configuration management allows us to actually do all of that tasks and jobs from our own console. Virtualization manager is another great product where we can actually manage the virtualization resources for VMware, for Hyper-V, for Nutanix, and we can do that without having to go to any of those vendor consoles, which is cool. But anyway, let's focus in on NCM, or network configuration management, because this is a key area, and there's a lot of automation built into this, Tony, right?
Yeah, there is. There's automation in terms of remediation, so creating baselines of your device configurations, as well as detecting in real-time changes to those devices, the ability to analyze for compliance, the configurations using industry best practice and out-of-the-box compliance reports, which can be used for automating remediation scripts.
Yeah, I think, and the Britney Spears song, "Oops, I Did It Again," comes to mind. So when somebody makes a mistake on their configuration file, that song plays in their head, and of course then they can roll back, if the backup ran last night correctly, they can roll back to the previous state. And going back to like that NetSuite example earlier on, so just going back in time and rolling back to that position of goodness can help them avoid embarrassment and issues in the organization. Secondly, we're going to talk about logs. Of course, the devil is in the detail, as they say. So typically when an issue occurs, the first place that people are going to look at is logs, and having integrated log collection within the Orion platform is a huge bonus, Tony, right?
Yes, I suppose we do have a number of different logging solutions across SolarWinds product portfolio, but within Orion itself, the main intention here is to alert on specific log entries, provide correlation through PerfStack, rather than having a long-time log archiving solution. So we do have, our security event manager, which provides event correlation and the ability to automate responses, such as blocking IP addresses on the firewall, or perhaps adding or removing a user from an Active Directory group, or even something as complex as detaching a hardware device that isn't on the whitelist. But there are two different use cases. Specifically within Orion, we do have the ability to receive syslog and traps with the log analyzer module, as well as the ability to retrieve VMware events if you have vMan, and Windows events. So slightly different use cases, but certainly very important to be able to react immediately in the event of a critical log entry being received.
Perfect. Let's have a look at those stuff. So Tony, I'm going to give you presenter rights again, and we'll have a good look at NCM and Log Analyzer if you may.
Okay, so we're currently looking at the Network Configuration Manager summary page. Two key charts here, looking at the overall configuration changes snapshot. So one of the first tasks that users of NCM typically do is perform a baseline of their network. That entails going off and downloading the current startup and running configs for your devices, and then performing an analysis or doing a policy violation report on those. So typically what you are aiming for here is a reduction over time in terms of the number of warning and critical violations that have been detected in your device configurations. If we do see any mismatch between your baseline or your startup and running config conflicts, it's easy to drill down into these network segments here and look at which devices have an unknown status or do have perhaps a conflict in their config status. If we drill down to a particular node, again on the left-hand side navigation here is the specific configs tab. And from here we get detailed information about the firmware vulnerabilities and the specific policies which have had violations detected, as well as a history as to the last 5 config changes, a full list of all of the configs, the the ability to download startup and running configs. For those who have other config types, it is possible to define those. You can simply execute a script. Okay, so you can type your commands here, execute those, or you can save those for further reuse, or you can upload a previously downloaded config to the device with the option to write it to memory and reboot the device afterwards. If you need more kind of detailed analysis, you can view individual change reports from here. And again, using that simple, red, amber, green approach to looking at what has changed, what has been added to a config, makes that process of diagnosis a lot simpler. Or if you're interested in identifying changes in their entirety between two particular points in time, you can do so here using the config change report. Further on the network configuration tab here is the compliance section. So this is where we come to look at all of the here's a good example, DISA STIG reports that are available in terms of analyzing your configs for best practice across multiple vendors. Looking at the example here for a Cisco policy report, is going to show me all nodes that have violated these particular configuration items in the policy report, and clicking the violation here gives me the option to execute a remediation script on this node or execute it on all nodes that have violated this particular rule item. Used in conjunction with syslog, Network Configuration Manager can provide real-time change detection. So as a user exits configuration mode, a syslog message or trap will be sent to Orion. Upon detecting that event, we will immediately go and download the latest startup or running config for that device and email you the change report for that node. Back to kind of the automation side, we have the ability to perform firmware upgrades. So really this is a massive time saver for those who perform regular, or scheduled updates of firmware images throughout the year. Here you can stage the operation, okay, for a specific set of devices that are supported. Okay, so for a Cisco Catalyst 2960, for example, you need to provide the firmware image itself. Once it's uploaded to your repository, we'll just pick an example device here. So just to reiterate, SolarWinds are not providing these firmware images. You would need to do so. You can select which nodes this firmware image will apply to. Here we collect the data from the device to validate that it will in fact be applicable. We can select the upgrade options and finally schedule that for a particular point in time. So it really simplifies the process of upgrading firmware on network devices, allowing you to align your service outages or planned maintenance routines with the functionality available within NCM. In terms of logs, okay, just one dashboard here to look at. Histogram across the top showing me the volume of logs for each particular time period, with the ability to start viewing logs in live mode as they are being received. You'll notice a mix of different event types here, from Windows system events to vSphere logs. If we scroll down, we'll see syslog messages. They can all be managed within the same interface here. The filters on the left-hand side can be used to refine the types of logs, or we can use a simple search within the result set here. Users can define their own tags, okay, for these messages. So for example here, interface down. We can configure rules based on the detection of this log pattern, or rules based on the configured tags. We do have, of course, kind of pre-processing and post-processing rules. So you can do if-then analysis. So for example, if it's a fan failure, then trigger an Orion alert, or discard the message if it's a trivial message. So basic log functionality, those logs would be retained for 7 days by default, intended really for the integration with PerfStack. If you are investigating, say, a hardware failure, is a good example we have here for performance analysis. So back to PerfStack. This is a kind of pre-configured example that we have here showing all of the metrics that are supported for real-time monitoring. But scrolling down, we have the syslog messages. So again, highlighting that particular component of the chart will activate the Data Explorer functionality here on the left-hand side, and we have the ability to further refine the messages or syslog messages that we are seeing. So whether it's a syslog message, a Windows event, it would appear here in the same visual representation within PerfStack.
And of course, Tony, those PerfStack visualizations can also be saved as widgets and imported into a dashboard, right?
Absolutely. You know, it's so easy to create them from scratch because it's drag and drop. But if we go back to the home summary page here, the WAN errors and discards resource, which will load in a moment here, you can see that this is actually a PerfStack project. So once you save a PerfStack project, it is available for you to add as a widget to an Orion view. So the Orion interface itself is very easily customizable. We can drag and drop resources around the page, or we can add widgets. So there are hundreds of out-of-the-box resources, but saving a PerfStack project will make it available in the widget drawer here.
Perfect. Okay, so let's move into the final piece. Tony, if you can make me presenter again, please. Thank you very much. Okay, so the last piece, we're going to look at the bandwidth management as well. So, you know, we're talking about ticking all the boxes, right? So can I monitor multi-vendor network devices? Yes, I can check that. Can I monitor end-to-end networks inside and out so my environment can monitor SaaS applications or any point to any point? Yes. Can we provide modern dashboards and all this kind of stuff and visualizations? Absolutely. Can we do configuration management? We do log collection from those devices. Everything's been ticked. Another one then, of course, which is a very popular kind of add-on for Network Performance Monitor is NetFlow Traffic Analyzer. And again, especially in today's world, you know, network traffic monitoring has really become an essential requirement within organizations, given that everybody's working from home. And we've got a bunch of VPN stuff coming on, and we really need to know what's going on and what's going through the network.
Yeah, definitely. Being able to identify, you know, who's using the most bandwidth, what are they using it for? It brings to mind a story from a few years back when I worked in professional services and deployed a Network Performance Monitor and NetFlow Traffic Analyzer for a local government in North America who were managing the library, the police station, fire services, power, water, you know, those different facilities. And immediately, you know, once you install NetFlow Traffic Analyzer and configure your devices to send the data, it just surfaces a wealth of information. Who's using my bandwidth and what are they using it for? And it was quite funny because we'd seen a lot of traffic going to a kind of well-known online gaming platform. And it turned out, you know, where we were able to identify where it was coming from. No fires at the moment. Okay, so folks there at the fire station weren't entirely, you know, caught up in their day-to-day responsibilities, so we could see exactly where that traffic was coming from.
Very good. Yeah, I must admit I did get caught one time for downloading Game of Thrones, but that's another day's work. But yeah. So listen, monitoring end to end, you know, seeing who's using the bandwidth, you know, who's taking it up, and I know we've got integration as well to a very specific protocol, NBAR2, Tony. So maybe you just explain what that is from a Cisco perspective.
So when NBAR is network-based application recognition, you know, really, if you consider a service that's using a content distribution network, you are never going to know every possible IP address that could be used to provide that service. So NBAR is the ability to just categorize application traffic in one name. So is it Facebook traffic? Is it BitTorrent traffic? And it provides a more richness of data for Cisco devices. But you know, John, we mentioned who's using your bandwidth, but there's one really important point there as well. When your bandwidth suddenly stops being used for its intended purpose. Right. So really what I'm talking about or referencing is the ability to receive alerts when your traffic decreases or disappears completely. So if I consider the profile of the bandwidth use between my two data centers, I'm doing backups at night, I'm doing replication, I should see a lot of SQL traffic, I should see certain types of traffic. If that disappears for any reason, it's definitely something of interest for me that I need to further investigate.
It can indicate application down status, right? Which is the highest level of issues an organization will face.
Yeah, absolutely. It really, to understand what NetFlow offers, it's like having a spyglass on the wire, looking at the source IP, the destination IP, the port, and the port protocol. Okay, so from that, NTA is able to build up a picture of your conversations, your endpoints, the destinations for your traffic, the countries for your traffic, and of course we can alert then on the conditions for those traffic profiles.
Super. We'll have a very quick look at that in a minute. Moving on to another one, the dynamic mapping, of course. We have had tools in the past where people can create static maps, but of course, static means static, and it's probably outdated a week after it's created. So the ability to create these dynamic maps is huge as well. And we've introduced this, I know, a number of releases ago, but we've continually added to this over time.
Mm-hmm. Yep, certainly this is a good example here of how you would use features within the Orion platform to test your network bandwidth. So there's a conversation going on there at the chat, and I'd like to kind of touch on a few points. Maps is one feature that allows you to see at a glance the interface utilization. Okay. From the slide here, you can see that the nodes on the bottom left and bottom right, there's a high interface utilization. To understand what is using the bandwidth, you need something like NetFlow Traffic Analyzer. So it can take NetFlow, SFlow, JFlow, IPFix, Hawaii, NetStream, all of those flow export formats, and it can digest and present those in an easy-to-use manner. So if I drill down into the interface that has 100% bandwidth utilization, I can now see who's using the bandwidth.
Yeah, and we've already had a look at the travel back in time as well in the previous demo.
Yeah, exactly. So if I needed to go back and see, what that looked like overnight, I could certainly do so. Now, there is another aspect to, monitoring network bandwidth, particularly when it comes to real-time applications like voice and video, and that is response time and jitter. Okay. One of the modules of the Netman portfolio is the VoIP and Network Quality Manager. It is able to monitor Cisco IPSLA operations, which are device-to-device operations. So unlike NetPath, which originates with a Windows agent, IPSLA is from the perspective of the network device on which you have configured it. So we can look at things like TCP jitter, UDP jitter, and packet loss, round trip time, to give a more qualitative indication as to your bandwidth profile. So for me, to really kind of, how would you use Orion to monitor your bandwidth? It's about interface utilization, flow analysis, and potentially, depending on your use case, also including an aspect of IPSLA.
Super. And then we've already touched on PerfStack, the kind of analytical and correlation engine that you can create these visualizations, save them as widgets, import them to dashboards, etc. So let's have a quick look at NetFlow Traffic Analyzer, Tony, if you don't mind. I'm going to give you the presenter rights once more, and we'll kick into that.
Okay, so the NetFlow Traffic Analyzer summary page is showing me flow data across all of my sources. So I mentioned that it's, like everything in Orion, okay, we're vendor agnostic. We support multiple protocols for flow analysis from the major vendors. So the first page is just traffic for the last hour, both ingress and egress, and IP4 and IPv6 traffic. Okay. A lot of data to condense and distill here if we're interested on a specific use case, for which purpose we have the Flow Navigator. Okay. If I'm only interested in a specific time period or flow direction or IP version or application is a nice example. So maybe I'm only interested in, wow, that's a big list of applications, right? These are well-known applications based on known ports, for example, 1433 being SQL, 3589 being RDP, but you can actually define your own applications for use within NetFlow as well. This is where NBAR comes into play, okay, for those who are fortunate enough to have that additional device capability. I can just simply define Amazon Web Services as an application. Okay. So quite a lot of granularity there on the left-hand side to allow you to filter if you need to do so. Alternatively, you can drill down on a device. Okay. So if I look at the source entity, here it's going to show me the interfaces that are sending flow data, and drilling down to the interface details now shows me data for the last hour, egress, IPv4 and IPv6. Here I can see the top 5 protocols for that time period and the top 5 endpoints, the types of applications that we're identifying, the different domains, the conversations between the endpoints and their names. If you're running any CB Quas policies, they can also be polled, and we can see the different types of service here and the utilization of those, or perhaps you're operating in a more service provider centric role, and you're interested in the autonomous system conversations for that particular time period. Everything here is drilled down. Okay, I'm just going to choose SQL Server as an example application. So drilling down to that is now going to bring me to an additional NetFlow application specific view. Again, it's for the same time period, flow and IP versions. But if I'm only interested in IPv4, it's as simple as selecting that value from the drop down. Top 5 transmitters. All of these resources can be customized to show top 5 or top 10, whatever you deem appropriate. Expanding the host name here will show me the node and the interface for which that traffic was traversing through, and the volume of data. Drilling down to the data itself, it brings me to the endpoint. Okay, so we've gone from an overall view of all traffic that's going through my network down to an individual device, an individual interface, a type of application, and now we've identified a specific endpoint, and we're looking at even down to the conversation level.
Just going to 2 seconds. We'll continue on in a second. I know we've got one last poll we want to run. So Mandy, if you want to run that poll there in the background, and we'll wrap things up with the content, because I know we're running close to the end of the hour here. So, sorry, Tony, keep going.
No worries. And those 30 minutes that you were going to give me at the start, definitely we could go into so many different use cases with Orion in terms of the products and the functionality, but this I think just offers a glimpse really into the possibilities. So we'll drill down into the endpoint. Okay. Again, it shows me all of the conversations. Really nice integration as well. If you have our user device tracker product, okay, that is monitoring the status of your physical switch ports, but is also capable of tracking Active Directory login events from your domain controllers. Putting that together allows me to correlate user logins with flow data. Right, so we have that capability. If you're receiving IP address information in your flows, if the switch is monitored using user device tracker, and if you're monitoring your domain controller login events, we would actually be able to drill down and show you the username with the ability to identify the physical port they're connected to, and even shut down that port.
Yeah, and I suppose one thing we need to kind of make sure we mention, everything we're seeing today is all integrated into a single pane of glass, the Orion platform. So, when we talk around reducing cost and optimization of processes and so on, and kind of making organizations a bit more agile, the integration really helps. We saw some of the survey results in terms of number of monitoring tools that people can take out, etc. Okay, so we're nearly at the top of the hour. Tony, if you want to throw the ball back to me there a second, and I'll wrap things up. And there's a couple of questions I know that have popped up as well. Jen, do you want to jump on and cover the questions or ask the questions? We'll try and answer those.
Sure. So one of the questions was around how to use NTA to test the network bandwidth.
Yeah, so I think, and thanks for that question. I think I tried to address that across the three different use cases. With first NPM providing the initial, from 0 to 100, how much percent utilization does a particular interface currently have? The next question you're going to ask yourself is, well, who and for what is that bandwidth being used? In which case you would use NetFlow Traffic Analyzer. To monitor performance, then we would use a mix of NetPath to look at the service delivery, and then also IPSLA to look at the quality of that link.
Okay, and then on installing the probes, the network probes, can you install those on a network device or a switch?
You cannot. So for NetPath, it has to be based on a Windows machine. So you install the agent software on a Windows node. For the equivalent functionality or similar, IPSLA on the network device itself, but we can't show you hop by hop from an IPSLA operation.
Okay, so it's got to be Windows, like everything else.
Yep.
Okay, so a couple of examples, customer reviews in terms of what they've benefited from the SPI integration. The one I like here, I'm going to point out, downtime is close to 0%. So the ability to identify root cause issues quickly, have fast responses, fast time to resolutions through this single pane of glass and integrated visibility, as I call it, is huge. For those of you who are maybe not familiar with the entire offering from SolarWinds, today we've just focused on network management, and even only a piece of network management. There's a whole bunch of stuff that is also included here, but we could just touch on some of the key ones. But we also cover service management, and that can be service requests from any part of a business, HR, legal, IT, of course, you name it. Of course, a big one then is application performance management. So we have a string of solutions there that allow you to monitor not just traditional packaged applications or traditional kind of in-house built applications with traditional software development cycles. We've also got the ability now to cover custom apps and agile development and DevOps type environments as well. And of course, every application, or the majority, will have some reliance on some database. So again, we're covering the traditional relational databases like Oracle, SQL, DB2, Sybase, SAP ASE, of course, now. And we've also acquired a company recently to allow us to cover all of the NoSQL open source type databases like MongoDB, Redis, etc. And of course, we have IT security as well on the right-hand side there, which permeates across a whole bunch of stuff. Infrastructure, of course, the servers, the virtual machines, the storage, all covered. And of course, we've covered today some of the network management piece. So that's it. We're just on the hour, so we've done exactly 59 minutes. So congratulations for sticking with us on that one. But SolarWinds as an organization, we're here to help. You can start small. You can do this on a modular basis and build it up over time. Some organizations come in and buy the full platform in one go. Other organizations take their time and they'll do it over 6 months, a year, 2 years, even more than that, right? We want to continue to make sure that we're the most affordable, most powerful solution in the marketplace. So make sure you kind of check out if you have any IT challenges that you're facing in terms of monitoring, analysis, management, service management, security. Just check out SolarWinds for solutions there. Okay, so with that, we're at the end. So Tony, thank you very much indeed for all of your support today.
Pleasure as always.
Couldn't do it without you. Thanks to Jennifer and Mandy for moderating in the background, and thanks to everybody who joined us today on the call. We do appreciate your time. I know you're very busy, so jumping on a call with us for 50, 60 minutes now, we really do appreciate it. We have lots more webcasts planned in the coming months, so stay tuned for those, and we look forward to talking to you again in the not too distant future. This session has been recorded, so you will receive a link to the recording in due course. Okay, take care everybody, and enjoy the rest of the day, and take care. Bye-bye.